Lucan had been observing the events unfolding at the location where his assistant was this whole time. Although the viewing had to be done from their native ally's perspective, it all proved too valuable and insightful to pass up. The rescue team had arrived at their crash site a while back, comprised mainly of a pilot, 2 medics, and 3 infantry soldiers. 2 out of the latter had quickly departed using the land vehicle that had been brought with them, most likely to fulfill the orders given by Ogden. While the xenobiologist kept taking notes on his datapad in the crashed ship's cockpit, Azael entered, the various wounds on her body now closed up using the biofoam that stimulates cell repair. They are now tending to Gabel. The 2 that took off to retrieve Ashin. They had standard kits and were armed with rail rifles. You really think this native, William, might really be able to take them? Huh? I hoped your manic bouts would have finished by now, but you were either always this delusional or only now did it get worse. You've come here to, what? Insult me more than you usually do? The wager has been made, regardless. Retracting myself now is not an option. It is either a chance at winning, or surrender for an immediate loss. Regardless, the data we are collecting right now is invaluable, both from the point of view of my usual studies and other interests, Lucan said coldly as he watched the live feed, seeing the native as Ashin communicated with it using illustrations it could understand, and then preceding the evacuation results. Other interests? You might as well spell it out. Military interests was clearly one of the first things that popped to your mind. You haven't been hiding that at all before, Azael continued as she leaned herself against one of the cockpit walls, arms crossed. You think that'd be the only one? Expectable. Grunt with a grunt's view. Oh, I do envy the simpler ways of living, Lucan said with a chuckle, as he multitasked between dishing out insults and keeping up with the recording. Azael, being extremely annoyed with that demeaning statement, was about to give Lucan a less polite piece of her mind, until a loud slapping noise came from the recording. The 2 Angelons then witnessed the unfolding scene between William and Godwin. It just gave a piece of the suit to that one in the form of a weapon after slapping it? Azael asked, confused, yet curious. I've been keeping track of chemicals its body releases into its own system. Until now, a large amount of it was adrenaline and cortisol. But it seems ever since it got here, endorphins and dopamine have been trickling in. The information from Ashin did not help with reducing the levels of the first. Based on its brain activity involving the hippocampus at this moment, might be someone close to it from its past. Interesting, Lucan mumbled as he kept on tapping away at his notes. What's so damn interesting to you? The fact that a piece of the suit now needs to be retrieved at a later date? That we'll be interfering more? Azael grumbled, exasperated at this point by the mess that this whole operation had become. You realize all the research we had been doing until now was from a relative distance, yes? Always putting precaution and not risking altering the course of how their world works, right? Well, the moment we crashed and William came to the impact area, even if we like it or not, we will now be a part of this world, even if momentarily. Plus, now I can observe from a much better point of view, from that of a being that lived its whole life here, Lucan exclaimed with excitement in his voice. Is there anything major to even learn from this? What is there to gain from observation of, I don't know what to call their designation running about, an attempt at an evacuation? Azael said while staring at the screen herself. The fact that they even know how to do one is impressive. Have you watched closely? William's first concern was not how to strategize against the enemy or go to fight them, but under the impression of fighting stronger enemies, it chose to instead help the others at this location to escape via hidden routes already built into the place. Not only that, but it gave part of the armor to one of them, one it seems to have a close relationship with, possibly familial. Do you get it? Do you understand the potential we are seeing here? Azael listened, and her golden eyes kept staring at the live feed, before looking about the cockpit, unfocused, as if staring at a visible horizon in contemplation. The irises moved as her pupils focused with a realization. Previous research we had confirmed their brutality, their religious belief, and generalized information on social hierarchies they had, as well as the most commonly met behaviors. But all of that focused on the bigger picture, on how things at large are, Azael said, trying to verbalize her thoughts. Yes, we've been thinking of them as primitive and barbaric when looking from a distance. But how exactly are they in close personal situations? This is the first time we see it properly. I have a myriad of observations written down based solely on their way of interacting with one another. The fact that William is prioritizing the other's safety over gaining a better chance at fighting by using increased numbers. Did you notice that some were unwilling to leave it behind? Without speaking, simply by analyzing body language and reading the situation. They were opposing leaving. They knew a threat much stronger than them was coming, yet some were willing to stand against it. What do our soldiers do whenever we have a dire situation on the battlefield? Lucan said as the fervor of his speech dimmed into a shamed tone. Units prioritize mission completion and life preservation. It's standard procedure, Azael responded with a tone, as if it were simple common knowledge. Erroneous! Our units prioritize individual self-preservation, and even mission completion is secondary based on a case study datasheet I've read about. What is ironic is that statistically working together should increase overall survival in most scenarios, or a minor sacrifice could mitigate a major loss. These are all things discussed between our war analysts, Lucan said as he turned to make eye contact with Azael, his expression somewhat disappointed. So, what? You want someone to lay their life willingly, or to go into suicide missions? Our military had to restructure to work around this. We both know of older age reports writing about when our military used to punish desertion and not following orders severely. At that time, our military was at their lowest, and the following decades when they used benzodiazepines to block fear stimuli didn't make it any better. Hell! It made most of our units at the time be unable to function without it! Azael yelled, annoyed, back at Lucan with a scowl. That is why I must know why! Lucan said with gritted teeth as he yelled, slamming his fist down on the console's frame. I need to know. I have to know why. Why can this thing do it? Why can someone inferior by comparison to us do it? It is clear it knows self-preservation, the importance of keeping alive, but it... I need to figure it out, Lucan said, lifting his trembling hand up, a bruise already forming on the part of his hand that slammed on the metal frame. As they spoke, the live feed began showing William exiting the building, the creak of the door from the transmission getting their attention. The guard and the scientist grew silent as they watched transfixed while William began looking about the courtyard. Soon enough, the fighting ensued, and a fight it was. The native was proving more than capable with the suit, maneuvering with it rather elegantly, even, at least by military standards. Ha! Truly unique! It seems to be doing rather well, even when outnumbered. It seems the operatives are even taking higher positions for an advantage when shooting. Lucan spoke with his minimal tactical knowledge. Azael, though, noticed the finer details of the situation. Yes, but something is weird. The one shooting above had delayed reactions. Hold on. He is backing away from the edge, but I can hear shooting. As Azael tried to figure out what was going on, her focus got shattered. The silence of the cockpit exploded with a soul-wrenching symphony of panicked screams, echoing in on themselves with misery. An unholy organ symphony of sheer terror was now forcing the two Angelans to shield their hearing organs. What is with this sudden transmission? Azael yelled as she approached the console, her eyes hastily scanning the display. Her golden eyes widened as she noticed the source was from nearby the location of the RF suit, but with a -0.2 designation. It's coming from the evacuees! The sword! Lucan took a moment to bounce back from the recoil of the sudden sound. He began focusing on the display, and as he listened to the explanation, He then looked back to the live feed and the biometric readouts coming from William's suit. It is hearing the transmission, too. It figured out what is happening. Its system is being flooded with adrenaline and noradrenaline. It's producing so much. The suit's system is increasing its replicated heartbeat to match previous neuro-recorded patterns. As Lucan observed the numbers, they kept increasing higher, much higher than the readouts said the body should be able to handle. By the Emperor! Azael watched as William struggled against the operative that restrained him, listening to his own tormented screams, the begging whines that his angry voice would die out into. Warning signs started popping up all over the biometric readouts, and still they watched. They watched the horror unfold. William had freed himself, and his propulsion system got overcharged to fly him, or more accurately, toss him high enough to reach the secondary operative. The following scuffle and fall were all on display as well. Their eyes couldn't part from the display showing how the soldier's head got erased on the stone surface. It got repeatedly bashed on and held against. It was like a piece of metal getting reduced to visceral ribbons on one of their industrial grinders. Lucan recommenced his note-taking, also instructing the ship's systems through the console to record all the suit's data further. It is forcing the suit to match its neuroimpulses instead of reading its body's biometric parameters. The synthetic heart is pumping blood so fast through its veins, it had to reinforce the main arteries with extra nanofilament, but it can't keep up. The damage is being done all over the venous system at once. Muscle oxygenation is peaked, internal body temperature rising. It has natural cooling systems, but they would fail without suit assistance. It is maximizing output. But how can it override the suit's organ replication parameters? The military's programmers had those hard-coded when reading our genetic print to avoid the life support overloading the soldier's body and endangering them, Azael said as she watched with an awe that petrified her. Ah, well said. The parameters are hard-coded to fit our biological records, but the suit didn't read the pilot's DNA matrix as Angelon. The limits were never implemented in the first place, Lucan replied quickly, elucidating the minor mystery. The dust had cleared, and William kept staring at the headless corpse he now held, his eyes shaking in his orbits. He kept coughing up blood, his helmet irrigating it as quickly as possible, recycling it back into his body. As he heard rocks tumble, he turned his head, peering at the other fallen angel that seemed to simply stare him down. He could feel his body and blood boil as the echoes of his family and friends screaming echoed in his mind. There was only darkness around. Nothing else mattered, except for that foul being. Words had left his mind. Reason had been eradicated. This feeling. He felt this fury before, on the battlefield when he witnessed the enemy using civilians tied to tower shields as meat shields to avoid. He screamed at the sight of the fallen angel as he reached at his own head and feeling the maw-like helmet. His clawed fingers reached at the edges of it, and as he pulled, the suit following his motions ripped itself open, transforming the toothy maws into a raised collar around his head, with the teeth protruding upwards and around. William's brown locks were darkened with the crimson maroon of his own blood, as they draped themselves over the spiked collar akin to bloody rags, dripping his life essence onto his back. Zadel looked him in the eyes through his helmet's HUD, the contact making his body shudder even worse than the scream did. Stubbed rail pistol raised, his limbs shook, his aim clearly off. As the two engaged in this visual contest of wills, the Angelon was the first to break. Zadel stepped back, as any person would when encountering a predator in their path. That simple movement was enough for William to start his deathly march forward. Big, thudding steps resounded onto the ground, akin to the heavy, low ticking of a clock, before hitting midnight. It exposed its own head, yet it is not afraid, Lucan said once more, feeling as if he is repeating himself, just hoping that by doing so, he'd come to a conclusion. His golden eyes peered to the side at Azael. Are you starting to understand me at all? About how I'm feeling? Why I am feeling the need to answer that why that is gnawing at the back of my mind? Azael did not respond, instead watching transfixed onto the holographic screen's feed. A single solemn nod, is all that the xenobiologist got as a reply in return, before he returned his own eyes to watch the situation. Zadel found himself struggling to move back, but as his senses managed to return to him, he started properly backpedaling to put distance between himself and the native. This retreating movement paused and resumed as the Anglon soldier stopped to shoot before continuing backwards. William wasn't fazed by the hellbolts anymore. By sheer instinct, without even a prayer in mind, his left forearm manifested a spiked buckler of red light, and he'd simply held it to his head. His forearm, diagonally placed in front of his face, still let him keep visual contact with his enemy using his left eye. Zadel's shots either ricocheted off the shield, grazed his target when his hand shook too hard, or if he hit, it was worse when he thought he hit it. The round broke part of the armor and showed the wound inside bleeding, only for the projectile to be pushed out, and the bleeding wound to keep pouring while the armor closed around it. The primitive native had no reaction to the shots that managed to land. He kept repeating the motions, as if stuck in a loop, only realizing he started dry firing with no charge after doing it 3 more times. With a gasp of realization, he then turned on his heel and was about to attempt a proper run to give himself more space to reload, but the Anglon was not used to the environment surrounding him entirely. As he passed through thick brush, a lifted root caught the front of his foot, and akin to a clasping manacle for a damned prisoner, it brought him down. No, is all Zadel thought while hyperventilating in his helmet. He scrambled to reload on the ground, and the Xeno soldier did so successfully. Still, as he was just about to get his footing under him to continue his reversed advance, a hit to his side knocked him onto his back. With a grunt and a yell as he got tossed on his back, Zadel let off a rail rifle shot, trying to aim for the upper side of center mass. Die, you primitive scum! He yelled with hatred, the visceral image of his decapitated colleague and friend, shooting through his mind like lightning. He was intent to do the same thing to the bastard creature that robbed his friend of his life. The shot rang out with its usual lightning-like electric discharge, the piece of metal that got shot going at an unbelievable speed, speeding out the barrel as a light-up blur. Still, the missing sound of a body thud sent a sense of impending doom deep inside Zadel's gut. William stood over him, a deep, bleeding groove, going like a trench-style graze along his cheekbone and along the side of his head above the ear. His head was leaning just slightly off the shot's trajectory, but even that graze was treated like nothing, despite the gushing blood now dripping down the side of his head and neck. His hands grabbed at the rail pistol, the red claws sinking into Zadel's hands, the wrenching of the gun along with the hard light finger dagger digging through his armor and into his flesh, ripped a scream out of his throat. Zadel kept trying to maintain hold of the gun, but the frantic movements and breathing made it clear he had lost any focus left. His mind flashed between the current struggle and past memories. The barrack room that he'd been sharing with Cassel for the past 3 years, how they turned it into a bit of a home for themselves, the additional privileges they worked together to earn. Zad! Hello! Command Center to Private Zadel! Cassel said as he lightly tapped his colleague on the side of his face. Casey, sorry, my mind's been all over the place. The last training simulation has been tough. We nearly won, Zadel said with a slightly defeated tone. Hey, we had a really good streak. But you can't win them all, yeah? Don't worry too much about that. We've been doing really good. How about a game of Space Dash? Cassel said with his usual at-ease demeanor, as he kindly extended one of the 2 controllers. Zadel could remember himself smiling, as he sat down on the lean-back, low-height comfort seat he had in his room. Yeah, we did promise to finish it last deployment, he replied with an at-ease expression, as he then took the controller and leaned his head back on the chair's headrest. One last time. William had wrenched the Hellbolt crossbow from the fallen angel's hands, tossing it aside. The furious knight then dropped down on his knees, straddling the fallen divine's chest, while his knees pinned his arms against the ground. With both hands, he then grasped the heretic's head, claws digging into its sides and leaking blue blood, as he proceeded to lift and slam it back down, each thud accompanied by a roared growl, as the repeating motion proceeded faster and faster with each hit. By the time his assault slowed, a few minutes had passed. The back of Zadel's head caved in considerably, blue blood and viscera coming out in blotches out of the cavity. William's grip eventually loosened as his hands shook, crimson light claws disengaging. He then stood up, only to crumple a few steps to the side of the ankylon. Zadel's body twitched and spasmed on the ground, his helmet recording one last thing before going silent entirely. We did promise. With that, the calm night took over the entirety of the Phallus Keep and its surroundings. Only silence was left to fill the dead air.